AOC has hit it out of the park with this one. This is the U27G3X, a 4K 160Hz IPS gaming monitor with HDMI 2.1 and a price tag that's literally half an equivalent display from someone like MSI, specifically the MAG323 UPF I reviewed at the start of the year. If you want a 4K gaming monitor, unless you have OLED money, this is the one to watch. Why? Well, let me show you everything in this hopefully very thorough review. Let's start with specs and claimed figures. Like I said, this is a 4K 160Hz monitor that uses an IPS panel. That means color should be great, as should response times. AOC claims this has a 1 millisecond grey to grey response time, although of course, we're going to test that. The monitor is G-Sync compatible, and thanks to the HDMI 2.1 ports, that should also work with consoles like the PS5 as well. While we're looking at the I/O, I should note that you get 2 HDMI ports and 2 DisplayPort 1.4 ports. No USB hubs here. Physically, the G3X follows AOC's older design cues, with red accents and an otherwise smooth and fairly curvy aesthetic. It's pretty inoffensive, although something that is are these damn OSD controls. The downward-facing individual buttons are uncomfortable to use, and the OSD itself is the same design AOC has been using since at least the G2460 PQU almost a decade ago. Just to emphasize this is what I looked like when I reviewed that monitor. It's been a while. Anyway, the menu does contain all of the usual settings, primary of which is the overdrive settings. The usual off, weak, medium and strong options are here as always. You do have the option to enable what AOC calls MBR, what Nvidia calls ULMB, basically their backlight strobing mode, the thing that I can't use and generally don't recommend. Although, not at the same time as adaptive sync. Just make sure of that. One other interesting feature is the ability to limit the HDMI ports, independently I might add, to either 120Hz or 144Hz. I guess if you're having some compatibility issues with something like a console, that is pretty cool. Oh, and you get all of the usual adjustments here too as well, things like height adjust, tilt, swivel, and even rotation into portrait mode if you want. The stand is pretty slim, but it's decently stable. When it comes to the more general usage, the stuff you do in between games, this is pretty great. 27 inches at 4K is incredibly sharp, and with a claimed 450 nits of peak brightness, it's pretty bright and vibrant. Colors look good to the eye, and content in general plays very well on the G3X. To put some metrics to those experiences, when it comes to colors, the Spider X2 reported 93% coverage of the DCI-P3 spectrum, which is pretty decent. Brightness meets its claims too, with my results running at 454 nits at peak, and a slightly higher than claimed 1140:1 contrast ratio. While that is pretty typical for an IPS panel, it's very clear there's a lot of IPS glow here. Happily, the color accuracy is on point, with an average delta E of just 0.44, with the worst results only reaching 1.13, a frankly astonishing result. In short, this is a pretty great panel for content, both in consumption and in creation. Of course, this is a gaming monitor, and rightfully you want to know about response times, latency, and how it feels to play. Luckily, I've built tools to give you all of that info, or at least the first two anyway, namely the open source response time tool. I specifically used my newest Pro CS version on this panel, and if you want to be able to test monitors like this yourself, head to osrtt.com and pick up one of the hand-built kits up yourself. Anyway, looking at the response time results, with no overdrive at all, we can see essentially the native panel's performance. This is actually really pretty good for an IPS panel with no overdrive, averaging about 7.2 milliseconds here. That's equivalent to about 138 Hz, which is really impressive. With the weak overdrive mode, it improves to under the refresh rate window at 5.11 milliseconds on average, with very minimal and certainly not visible ghosting at all. This would be a pretty decent mode to use, although I think the next step up, medium, is my preferred option. That does introduce a bit of noticeable overshoot, but it helps reduce the initial response time to just 4.28 milliseconds, meaning the frames almost always get fully drawn with time to spare between frames. Either mode is more than serviceable though. Of course, strong, the what we in the biz call the marketing mode, well, it's just frankly ridiculous that monitor companies bother shipping this mode at all. It actually makes the perceived response time so bad that it ends up being longer than the average with no overdrive at all. For context, here is Aperture Gorill's Frog Pursuit test in slow motion, with just some of the worst overshoots I've seen on an IPS panel. Don't use this mode, please. I am happy to report the on-display latency is spot on, with the average OSRTT reporting coming in right around half of the refresh rate window, with very few results sneaking above 1 frame worth of delay. That's exactly what you want to see, and that translates to a frankly phenomenal gaming experience. This level of sharpness, both from the hefty pixel density and from the fast response times, make for a very compelling experience. Even fast motion looks smooth and sharp, and while it's no OLED, when actually gaming, I didn't mind much. It was plenty easy to hit shots, react to enemies popping up, and if it means anything to you, I scored consistently higher when playing on this monitor than I usually would even with the same peripherals and setup. In short, it's a great gaming monitor. By far one of the biggest surprises for me with this monitor is the price tag. This is for sale right now at Curry's for £399. I think that makes this one of, if not the cheapest, 4K 144Hz plus gaming monitors on the market, let alone one with HDMI 2.1 and 160Hz refresh rates, and that's this good. This is an absolute steal at this price point. At its supposed MSRP of more like £499, it's still a great deal, but for a full £100 off right now, well, that's just a buy it now price for me. Naturally, this gets a solid recommendation from me, and if you want to check it out, I'll leave a link in the description for you to see pricing when and where you watch this. Of course, those are my thoughts, but I would love to hear yours in the comments down below. What do you think about the U27G3X? Is it a monitor for you, or is there something else or some issue with it that you have? Let me know in the comments down below. Equally, like I said, if you do want to check it out, there will be a link in the description, as will there be a link to osrtt.com if you want to be able to test monitors like this yourself, or maybe recommend them to your other favourite reviewers as well. You can also hit the subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this one on a very regular basis, and you can check out plenty of other videos on the end cards as well. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching, hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you all in the next video.